Hey everybody, John St. Thomas here with CMG Financial. Hope you're having a great day. We want to create a little video for you in regards to how to buy a new primary residence while converting your old home into a rental property. So basically you currently live in your primary residence, you would like to move elsewhere, but you don't want to sell your current primary. You'd like to convert it to a rental property. So the question is, how do you go about doing that? Excuse me. And that's a question we get a lot right now. And I think it has a lot to do with people who currently live in their primary residences have very low interest rates. Many of us do, right? We have 2%, 3%, 4%, maybe 5% rate, but most of us are probably between 2, 3, and 4%. So we see the opportunity of holding on to this property as a rental because our payment is relatively low, and we know that we can get cash flow or rent payments for much higher than what our current mortgage is. So we look at it as a great way to obtain kind of passive income, maybe some wealth building with holding on to the piece of real estate. So the question a lot that we get is, well, how do I manage to do this? Because a lot of people typically will sell their first home to buy property number two because they need the funds from property number one, the proceeds they're going to get from that sale, to put down on property number two. So the question is then, okay, well, if I'm not going to do that, where's this going to come from? That's generally the biggest hurdle for most people. And now something that we've done in the past is somebody can do a cash out refinance on their first property, pull some cash out. Now they have that cash available to go buy property number two. We're not doing as many of those right now because when you do a cash out refinance, your interest rates move to what today's rates are. So if you had a 2, 3, or 4% rate and you do a cash out refi, now you're going to have a rate of 6, 7, 8%, which isn't so attractive and now may erode your cash flow. So instead, what we're looking at for a lot of people are home equity lines of credit, or HELOCs as we call them. Because the way that those work is those are what we call a second position mortgage. So you keep your first position mortgage at 2, 3, 4%, and then you have a small HELOC in second position. And that HELOC is only going to be for the dollar amount that you need to put down on the next home. So think of it this way. If I have a first position mortgage that's say $200,000 and the rate's 2.5%, and then I have a small HELOC of maybe $50,000 behind it, and that rate is 8, 9, 10%. When I look at that blended rate, that combination of the $200,000 loan at a 2.5% rate and that $50,000 loan at say a 10% rate, that blended rate together kind of is say 3.5%, 4%. So it's still overall a very low rate. So it can be the more attractive option for people. And we're seeing a lot of clients doing that, tapping equity through what we would call a HELOC to obtain the funds necessary to go buy property number two. So then the second hurdle in this is, okay, well, how do I qualify for property number one's payment as well as property number two's payment? Well, some people are able to qualify for both mortgage payments, and that's of course great. But most of us are not able to do that. So how do we offset this? Well, the way that we offset it is property number one, the original property, is going to get rented out, right? That's the whole purpose of us doing this. So what we need to do is we need to get a lease in place or a rental agreement in place prior to you vacating property number one and then moving into property number two. Because if we do that, we can then use the lease that we have in place to offset that mortgage payment for property number one. We can basically count 75% of the lease to offset the mortgage on property number one. So for example, let's say we have a lease for $2,000 a month, and let's say that my mortgage payment on property number one was $1,500 a month. So I'm going to cash flow about $500 a month. But for purposes of what we're going to count in the mortgage space, we're going to count 75% of that $2,000, which comes out to $1,500. So from our side of things, we're looking at a mortgage payment of 15. We're going to count 15. It basically balances out and wipes out that first mortgage payment as though it almost doesn't even exist. So then you're realistically only qualifying for home number two and mortgage number two. So this is how we help a lot of clients in doing this. So if any of you have an idea or a want of possibly turning an existing home into a rental property, you don't want to sell it, but you'd like to see if you could turn it into an income producing property, what that might look like for you, we can definitely help you in strategizing and coming up with a way to make this feasible for you. We have HELOC products that we can look into for you guys, and then of course we can run all the numbers and simulations to figure out what you can qualify for property number two, what would property number one potentially rent for, so on and so forth. So wanted to bring this up because we're getting this inquiry a lot. I'm sure some of you have thought about this, but just didn't really know where to start. We can of course help with all that. It's something that I have done personally. I have personally leapfrog, however you want to call that, from a property to move into a second property and rent it out property number one. So I have personally done this as well as helped clients do it as well. So if you have some interest in this, please reach out as always. You can, of course, call, text, email us. My number is 480-241-8600, and Rebecca's is 602-326-9606. So as always, have a wonderful rest of your week, and hopefully you gained some insight from this. Take care.